Besides from this event, rare in the everyday life of people, my present position also arose because later on in my preparatory and adult life, as I must confess, I myself guessed after long reflections, according to the method of the German professor Herr Stumpfsinschmausen, I always avoided, instinctively as well as automatically, and at times even consciously, that is on principle, employing this language for intercourse with others. And from such a trifle, and perhaps not a trifle, I manifested thus again, thanks to 3 data which were formed in my entirety during my preparatory age, about which data I intend to inform you a little later in this same first chapter of my writings. However that may have been, yet the real fact, illuminated from every side like an American advertisement, and which fact cannot now be changed by any forces, even with the knowledge of the experts in monkey business, is that although I, who have lately been considered by very many people as a rather good teacher of temple dances, have now become today a professional writer, and will of course write a great deal, as it has been proper to me since childhood, whenever I do anything, to do a great deal of it. Nevertheless, not having, as you see, the automatically acquired and automatically manifested practice necessary for this, I shall be constrained to write all I have thought out in ordinary, simple, everyday language established by life, without any literary manipulations and without any grammarian wiseacrings. But the pot is not yet full, for I have not yet decided the most important question of all. In which language to write? Although I have begun to write in Russian, nevertheless, as the wisest of the wise, Mullah Nasruddin would say, in that language you cannot go far. Mullah Nasruddin, or as he is also called, Hoja Nasruddin, is, it seems, little known in Europe and America, but he is very well known in all countries of the continent of Asia. This legendary personage corresponds to the American Uncle Sam, or the German Till Eulenspiegel. Numerous tales popular in the East, akin to the wise sayings, some of long standing, and others newly arisen, were ascribed and are still ascribed to this Nasruddin. The Russian language, it cannot be denied, is very good. I even like it, but only for swapping anecdotes and for use in referring to someone's parentage. The Russian language is like the English, which language is also very good, but only for discussing in smoking rooms, while sitting on an easy chair with legs outstretched on another, the topic of Australian frozen meat, or sometimes the Indian question. Both these languages are like the dish which is called in Moscow Solyanka, and into which everything goes except you and me, in fact, everything you wish, and even the after-dinner chesma of Scheherazade. It must also be said that owing to all kinds of accidentally, and perhaps not accidentally formed conditions of my youth, I have had to learn, and moreover very seriously, and of course always with self-compulsion, to speak, read and write a great many languages, and to such a degree of fluency that if, in following this profession unexpectedly forced on me by fate, I decided not to take advantage of the automatism which is acquired by practice, then I could perhaps write in any one of them. But if I set out to use judiciously this automatically acquired automatism, which has become easy from long practice, then I should have to write either in Russian or in Armenian, because the circumstances of my life during the last 2 or 3 decades have been such that I have had for intercourse with others to use, and consequently to have more practice in, just these 2 languages, and to acquire an automatism in respect to them. Oh, the dickens! Even in such a case, one of the aspects of my peculiar psyche, unusual for the normal man, has now already begun to torment the whole of me. And the chief reason for this unhappiness of mine, in my almost already mellow age, results from the fact that since childhood there was implanted in my peculiar psyche, together with numerous other rubbish also unnecessary for contemporary life, such an inherency as always and in everything automatically enjoins the whole of me to act only according to popular wisdom. In the present case, as always in similar as yet indefinite life cases, there immediately comes to my brain, which is for me constructed unsuccessfully to the point of mockery, and is now, as is said, running through it, that saying of popular wisdom which existed in the life of people of very ancient times, and which has been handed down to our day, formulated in the following words: "Every stick always has two ends." In trying first to understand the basic thought and real significance hidden in this strange verbal formulation, there must, in my opinion, first of all arise in the consciousness of every more or less sane-thinking man the supposition that, in the totality of ideas on which is based, and from which must flow a sensible notion of this saying, lies the truth, cognized by people for centuries, which affirms that every cause occurring in the life of man, from whatever phenomenon it arises, as one of two opposite effects of other causes, is in its turn obligatorily moulded also into two quite opposite effects, as for instance, if something obtained from two different causes engenders light, then it must inevitably engender a phenomenon opposite to it, that is to say, darkness, or a factor engendering in the organism of a living creature an impulse of palpable satisfaction also engenders without fail non-satisfaction, of course also palpable, and so on and so forth, always and in everything. Adopting in the same given instance this popular wisdom, formed by centuries and expressed by a stick, which, as was said, indeed has two ends, one end of which is considered good and the other bad, then if I use the aforesaid automatism, which was acquired in me thanks only to long practice, it will be for me personally, of course, very good. But according to this saying, there must result for the reader just the opposite. And what the opposite of good is, even every non-possessor of hemorrhoids must very easily understand. Briefly, if I exercise my privilege and take the good end of the stick, then the bad end must inevitably fall on the reader's head. This may indeed happen, because in Russian the, so to say, niceties of philosophical questions cannot be expressed, which questions I intend to touch upon in my writings also rather fully, whereas in Armenian, although this is possible, yet to the misfortune of all contemporary Armenians, the employment of this language for contemporary notions has now already become quite impracticable. In order to alleviate the bitterness of my inner hurt owing to this, I must say that in my early youth, when I became interested in and was greatly taken up with philological questions, I preferred the Armenian language to all others I then spoke, even to my native language. This language was then my favourite chiefly because it was original and had nothing in common with the neighbouring or kindred languages. As the learned philologists say, all of its tonalities were peculiar to it alone, and according to my understanding, even then, it corresponded perfectly to the psyche of the people composing that nation. But the change I have witnessed in that language during the last 30 or 40 years has been such that instead of an original independent language coming to us from the remote past, there has resulted and now exists one which, though also original and independent, yet represents, as might be said, a kind of clownish potpourri of languages, the totality of the consonances of which falling on the ear of a more or less conscious and understanding listener, sounds just like the tones of Turkish, Persian, French, Kurd and Russian words, and still other indigestible and inarticulate noises. Almost the same might be said about my native language, Greek, which I spoke in childhood, and, as might be said, the taste of the automatic associative power of which I still retain. I could now, I dare say, express anything I wish in it, but to employ it for writing is for me impossible, for the simple and rather comical reason that someone must transcribe my writings and translate them into the other languages, and who can do this? It could assuredly be said that even the best expert of modern Greek would understand simply nothing of what I should write in the native language I assimilated in childhood, because my dear compatriots, as they might be called, being also inflamed with the wish at all costs to be like the representatives of contemporary civilization also in their conversation, have during these 30 or 40 years treated my dear native language just as the Armenians, anxious to become Russian intelligentsia, have treated theirs. That Greek language, the spirit and essence of which were transmitted to me by heredity, and the language now spoken by contemporary Greeks, are as much alike as, according to the expression of Mullah Nasruddin, a nail is like a requiem. What is now to be done? Ah me! Never mind, esteemed buyer of my wiseacrings. If only there be plenty of French Armagnac and Khazarian Basturma, I shall find a way out of even this difficult situation. I am an old hand at this. In life, I have so often got into difficult situations and out of them, that this has become almost a matter of habit for me. Meanwhile, in the present case, I shall write partly in Russian and partly in Armenian, the more readily because among those people always hanging around me, there are several who cerebrate more or less easily in both these languages, and I meanwhile entertain the hope that they will be able to transcribe and translate from these languages fairly well for me. In any case, I again repeat, in order that you should well remember it, but not as you are in the habit of remembering other things, and on the basis of which are accustomed to keeping your word of honour to others or to yourself, that no matter what language I shall use, always and in everything, I shall avoid what I have called the bon ton literary language. In this respect, the ordinary curious fact, and one even in the highest degree worthy of your love of knowledge, perhaps even higher than your usual conception, is that from my earliest childhood, that is to say, since the birth in me of the need to destroy birds' nests and to tease my friends' sisters, there arose in my, as the ancient theosophists called it, planetary body, and moreover, why I don't know, chiefly in the right half, an instinctively involuntary sensation, which right up to that period of my life when I became a teacher of dancing, was gradually formed into a definite feeling, and then, when thanks to this profession of mine, I came in contact with many people of different types, there began to arise in me also the conviction, with what is called my mind, that these languages are compiled by people, or rather grammarians, who are, in respect of knowledge of the given language, exactly similar to those biped animals whom the esteemed Mullah Nasruddin characterises by the words, "All they can do is wrangle with pigs about the quality of oranges." This kind of people among us who have been turned into, so to say, moths, destroying the good prepared and left for us by our ancestors and by time, have not the slightest notion and have probably never even heard of, the screamingly obvious fact that, during the preparatory age, there is acquired in the brain functioning of every creature, and of man also, a particular and definite property, the automatic actualization and manifestation of which the ancient Corcellans called the law of association, and that the process of the mentation of every creature, especially man, flows exclusively in accordance with this law. In view of the fact that I have happened here accidentally to touch upon a question which has lately become one of my, so to speak, hobbies, namely the process of human mentation, I consider it possible, without waiting for the corresponding place predetermined by me for the elucidation of this question, to state already now in this first chapter at least something concerning that axiom which has accidentally become known to me, that on earth, in the past, it has been usual in every century that every man, in whom there arises the boldness to attain the right to be considered by others and to consider himself a conscious thinker, should be informed while still in the early years of his responsible existence that man has in general two kinds of mentation. One kind, mentation by thought, in which words always possessing a relative sense are employed, and the other kind, which is proper to all animals as well as to man, which I would call mentation by form. The second kind of mentation, that is, mentation by form, by which, strictly speaking, the exact sense of all writing must also be perceived, and after conscious confrontation with information already possessed be assimilated, is formed in people in dependence upon the conditions of geographical locality, climate, time, and, in general, upon the whole environment in which the arising of the given man has proceeded and in which his existence has flowed up to manhood. Accordingly, in the brains of people of different races and conditions, dwelling in different geographical localities, there are formed about one and the same thing or even idea a number of quite independent forms, which during functioning, that is to say, association, evoke in their being some sensation or other, which subjectively conditions a definite picturing, and which picturing is expressed by this, that, or the other word, that serves only for its outer subjective expression. That is why each word for the same thing or idea almost always acquires for people of different geographical locality and race a very definite and entirely different, so to say, inner content. In other words, if in the entirety of any man who has arisen and been formed in any locality, from the results of the specific local influences and impressions, a certain form has been composed, and this form evokes in him, by association, the sensation of a definite inner content, and consequently of a definite picturing or notion for the expression of which he employs one or another word which has eventually become habitual, and, as I have said, subjective to him. Then the hearer of that word, in whose being, owing to different conditions of his arising and growth, there has been formed concerning the given word a form of a different inner content, will always perceive and, of course, infallibly understand that same word in quite another sense. This fact, by the way, can, with attentive and impartial observation, be very clearly established when one is present at an exchange of opinions between persons belonging to two different races, or who arose and were formed in different geographical localities.